Welcome to Deep Dive Film School. I'm Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see /hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people what?
Find good media. That's right. Our most active channels are YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. So join us there. We do shorts every week. The idea from Step Brothers of Fuck, Marry, Kill. We do that every week. Yes. So please join us. Anyways, okay, so this is the second installment of our Cyberpunk Festival. We did 2017's Blade Runner 2049.
Yes.
This takes place 30 years after the original movie.
Which takes place in 2019.
Yes.
Which was kind of, I think in the book, the Phillip K. Dick book, it does take place in 2020, and Ridley Scott felt like it was a little on the nose because so much of the movie is about eyes that he was like, oh, 2020 seems like it's a little, so he made it 2019.
Interesting.
So that's why it's a 2049. But yeah, and this is a movie that when I heard that there was going to be a sequel to Blade Runner, I was mad.
I was going to ask you, do you think we needed another Blade Runner?
No. I don't think that we needed another Blade Runner.
But when you heard Denis was the director,
yeah, that changed everything.
That changes everything. Right?
And what's interesting is that this movie, I actually think that question you just asked is perfect, because this idea of, do we need another Blade Runner? Do we need a sequel to one of the most classic cinematic experiences, right? Even though maybe sci-fi experiences. I mean, all right, maybe the story itself is not quite as interesting as the visuals are in the original one. But I would say the story here is as strong as the visuals are. It is such an interesting revisiting of the Blade Runner world, because you're like, okay, the world's established now.
Yeah.
So we can wander around a little bit more and try out other kind of philosophical ideas.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, it's kind of funny to contrast this against Dune, where he created the world from the first one, right?
Right.
And so he's creating a world which he's absolutely fucking amazing at.
Oh, yeah.
Of creating these huge, massive worlds that have so much depth and detail and scope to them. But here, where you're doing the sequel, there is a template that you're following. And I actually think Ridley Scott is a pretty good comp for Denis. As far as generational directors, who is who.
I would totally agree with that.
I could absolutely see something like that happening.
Well, and there's something that's really interesting where the first Blade Runner, while there is this incredible world and this incredible scope, Denis, I don't know how else to explain it other than it's almost like they talk about this phenomenon called megalophobia, right? Which is you have the fear of the giant ship, right? You see the giant ship's bow and you get this dizzy, weird feeling. He takes full
advantage of that
perspective. I think he has megalophilia. I think he's maybe a little
the opposite of that.
Yeah, I think he's maybe a little turned on by it, because if you go all the way back to Arrival, everything he's done has the scope of these massive, looming things.
That's why it's so perfect for Dune as well.
Well, and I don't think, and completely with Dune, but I don't think that I realized, in the first Blade Runner, you get that, the original Tyrell Corporation building, and we're zooming in on it. It has a sense of it being massive with that Vangelis soundtrack and all that.
But the future, the digital ads, all of that stuff, I think he does an amazing job to what Ridley Scott did and really made it be the same world and kind of its own thing, right? There's these huge epic shots that he loves. He's so fantastic at world building, and he has this template. But the details and of what's going on are spot on. And it's that world evolved 30 years. Right?
Well, yeah, it's that world evolved. And then if you think about it, while we did ask the question in the original movie of what if I'm not a human? What if I'm a replicant?
Well,
right?
They do a brilliant job of that here too.
Well, it's the inverse.
Yeah.
I know I'm a replicant, and most everybody that I'm around are also replicants.
But maybe
I'm a human, right? And it's that's so cool. And there's
brilliant writing in this movie.
Yeah, there's these moments where it's Kay and he's with another replicant, and they're talking about their memories and like talking about those memories being fake and that they know that they're fake. And you're sitting
How do
and
you know
watching it,
it's
and you're
real?
like,
But you
this
asked-
is so weird. It's so existential.
Well,
right?
you asked very similar questions in the first movie too, right? Like they did a brilliant job of balancing that. You're right; it is the inverse. I hadn't thought of it that way, but it absolutely is. And they bring kind of a, one, we get an answer to that last frame of Blade Runner of
Yes.
what happened after that.
Yep.
So we get a whole history of that, which is excellent. A lot of times people make movies like these sequels to be kind of inviting to anyone. Like it doesn't matter if you haven't seen the old Blade Runner. I
Right.
actually think it's pretty important to see the old Blade
Oh,
Runner
yeah.
for this to be effective at all.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, directors will make it fun enough or not. They'll do the throwbacks and the Easter eggs of stuff. They don't want so much to rely on the other movie of knowing the other movie to move forward on this one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and this one, it's like it makes all of the assumptions that you have not only seen the other one, but that's the reason why you're here to see this
100%.
one.
I mean, that's why I did.
Same.
This is the second time I've seen it. The first time was just when it came out in the theater. So it'd been since 2017. So that's 7 years since I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, yeah, that's about half an hour too long. And I'm right still. But man, I enjoyed it so much more this time. I did like it the first time, but there was a lot going on. And you're trying to, match it with the other movie a little bit and kind of see the similarities, because there's a lot of it. We even have Edward James Olmos and Sean Young in this one. It is Sean Young, right?
No, it is a body double with a CGI Sean Young face.
I thought it
So
might have
it's
been
not
like the
not
Iron,
actually-
like the Marvel like young and
De-aging.
De-aging
I don't
thing, yeah.
think that it is. I think that it's. I don't.
She
think
is
that
listed in the credits, so she
well,
did something.
but they are using archival footage of her. That might be what she's listed in the credits. I believe that she's.
It looks pretty flawless.
It does. I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe that she's really difficult to work with.
Oh, interesting.
And so I just think that they were like, it's fine. We just need a young version of her. I could be wrong, but I believe that that's true.
She's Einhorn too, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
In Ace Ventura.
Yeah, but I would say the one of the interesting aspects of watching this movie and thinking about all of some of the criteria that we've been talking about with this sort of cyberpunk aesthetic.
Yeah.
One thing I'm really noticing is like there's so much aesthetic in the Blade Runner world that also does come from some of those other artists like Mobius, and in 2 weeks we'll be doing Akira, and there's so many of those visuals that overlap here. But it's interesting the things that have become sort of quote unquote cyberpunk that have nothing to do with flying cars. Like this weird maggot farm that he travels to at the very beginning.
Dave Bautista.
Yeah, Dave Bautista, but even like the giant guy with the tiny little glasses.
Yeah.
The bleached out,
like
sour, sort of piss looking rooms, right? Like Kay's great big leather trench coat with the weird strap that can strap up around here like this.
Oh, yeah.
All of those things are also cyberpunk, right? Like
For sure.
all of that stuff also has this like aesthetic to it
It's
that
like
I
a
was
comic
like,
book almost.
yeah, I was like, this or even just like the guy with the huge gun that's in the trench coat that's like had the shit beat out of him, so he's all bloody, right? Like all of those elements, I'm like, all of this feels like that same cyberpunky world.
Frank Miller.
Yeah, like RoboCop. Like there's these elements that still feel like part of this genre that don't have to be, because like when you look online, like nowadays cyberpunk obviously is being utilized connected directly with the video game, right? Of course, that's the one thing. But then the other thing too is that I feel like the newer generations are really mistaking it for like the vaporwave thing. So everything is like super shiny chrome and everything has like pink neon. And I'm like, pink neon's kind of a part of it, but it's pink neon across Ryan Gosling's beat the shit out of face.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have both of those aesthetics, it's not really cyberpunk.
Interesting.
And like that was the thing I noticed this time around, because I'm like,
So
first of
you're
all,
saying there's some things that have evolved within cyberpunk that are like new in this movie?
Well, or no, I don't. I think that this movie is more true to what Cyberpunk in the 80s originally was, of things like Judge Dredd and things like the original Blade Runner that have been lost a little bit with the shininess of something like The Matrix, right? Where like The Matrix, like it's so, I mean, unless you're in the real world when they're all in their like raggedy burlap sack clothes, I guess. But other than that, like the Matrix looks fucking cool, all right? Everybody has like blonde dreadlocks and shit like that. But I think that the beginning of this movie, first of all, can we talk about how ballsy it is that he opens, Villeneuve opens the Blade Runner sequel on a washed out dirt farm.
Yeah, it's
right.
amazing.
We don't see the city. Like we see the car and we're like, cool. And I love the overhead shot where he's flying in because you're like, you know, you and I have been talking so much about like AI lately and things like that. And I was like, oh, like the skyline of the farms. I'm like, that's a farm that a computer would come up with.
Exactly.
Right. That's not a farm that a human would come up with. And, but I was just like, it made me realize how much this movie looked like Blade Runner before we ever even see the city. Obviously there's a great, echo and nod to the final fight between Decker and Batty in the beginning of this movie where he pushes him through the wall, right? And he breaks through the wall and he's beating the shit out of him. I'm like, oh yeah, this is like the end of the fight between Batty and Decker, right?
Yeah, Sapper Morton, is that who you're talking about?
Sapper Morton,
with
yes.
Dave Bautista. Yeah, no, just to go over a little bit of the, you know, kind of the main plot and story here, but we essentially are in an evolved world. Tyrell is no longer around. Replicants are still being slaves. And Neander Wallace is an industrialist. Wallace
is taken over.
Essentially the new Tyrell, you know, wanting to create an army, and Jared Leto plays him. Happy birthday.
We'll talk about Jared Leto in a minute.
Horrible here. But essentially, the Nexus 8s are the oldest version of replicants, and they never got like tagged with a lifespan. Yeah. And so they can kind of live forever. And
which is why Blade Runners still exist.
Exactly. Yeah. And his job is to go out and kill these old Nexus 8 robots, retire them,
Retire. What a great idea that a replicant, one of the newer models, is going out and retiring. I mean, that's so cool.
He asks him in that first scene, he's like, what's it like killing your own?
Yeah. You know, and he's like, yeah, you old type 8s, you know, and he says something derogatory about them. And then, Sapper's character is like, well, while you guys are just content to shovel shit, right? Like you'll do all the dirty work, which is kind of crazy because we see Kay lives a super lonely life.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's walking down the hallway at the police station, and other cops are like,
"Skin job,
get out of here, skin job," all that shit, and you're like, "Oh wow!"
Well, and his apartment, his whole routine with Era de Armas,
Joey,
and just kind of, he's obviously a lonely guy.
Yeah,
and it even says "fuck you" something on his front door, right?
Yeah, like the people there know that he's a replicant and treat him like shit. Like, and so when he goes to retire Sapper, he realizes that Sapper's left a flower at the base of this dead tree, and so they investigate. One of the things I think that gets overlooked a lot about the original movie is that it is a detective story, right?
100%.
And so is this, and that I was like, it makes me so happy because a lot of times we forget that.
Well, because it's so much more than just that.
Yes,
and that's because of Denis, because of who he chooses, how he chooses to shoot things.
Yeah.
100%.
You need that neo-noir kind of vibe to it of like it being a detective story. And then obviously we very quickly realize that this is going to tie us directly back into the first movie. Similar characters, the fact that she had a child, like that there's
a replicant that got pregnant somewhere.
Yeah.
And where is this child? Who is the child? And that unfurls the investigation, but it's a dead tree outside of his house, right? That they end up finding a box of bones in, and that was his wife's bones from 30 years ago. And they find them and find a like barcode number or something on the bones and realize it's a replicant, but you could see that she's had a child.
And
so there's the whole mystery. You got to find out who it is, what it is, and
I like that David Demeska. How do you say his last name? I like that he's like, yeah, he probably ate her, and then turns and looks at Kay, and he's like, sorry, right? And you just go, yeah, like that's your regular everyday schmo thinks that these replicants are basically monsters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I just thought was like a fascinating. It's like so sprinkled in throughout everything.
But they work for the LAPD pretty much. Like Robin Wright is like the head of whatever division she runs to get these replicants or whatever, and they have this great conversation about how do you know what are your memory like how do you know what memories are real and which ones are
oh my god
right?
and Gosling's line there, I was like, it's so perfect because he goes, I feel a little weird recalling a memory to you that I know is fake.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that's a factory setting, like that like to get him to have like some kind of a disposition. You have all these fake memories that they plug into people or plug into the replicants, but even he's embarrassed to recount a fake memory to a human. Like I was like, what a wild thing to think about. Like
even though it's a memory and it may not be his memory, it is still a memory that happened, right? And so, you have to kind of think of the depth of what they're trying to get at here, and she says at the end of that scene, you've been fine without one, a soul.
A soul. Yeah. He's never killed anything that's had a soul, right? And and God, I mean, that's what's so great about it is that to snowball these same ideas into storylines that are not part of the Philip K. Dick original story, and still have it feel so
in the world.
Yeah, just so potent with the same questions about the idea of a soul, the idea of identity, and the idea that like, what if he could be the one that's so special? Can we talk for a second about joy? Because I think that, as we're talking about this, like kind of nesting doll ideas inside of ideas inside of ideas, the fact that we are following Kay, who knows he's a replicant, but hopes maybe there's a glimmer of a chance he might be a human because one of the clues is about a date, which he had on his false memory of a little wooden horse.
Yes.
And so now he's hopeful.
And wood is not a common thing.
No, wood is like, I mean, the one prostitute's like, was that a picture of a tree? I've never seen one in real life. And you're like, whoa, it's crazy. But,
or like the guy who's examining it and saying, hey, it's wood, you're rich.
Yeah, you're rich now because it's made of actual wood. And he does lead this lonely life, but he has, basically a hologram version of Scarlett Johansson's character from Her,
Yeah.
And it's an amazing performance. It's an amazing portrayal.
She's great.
She's fantastic. The way that she's portrayed, as you can see the little machine moving up on the ceiling,
she's attached to that room.
To that room until he gets the little stick. He gives her a gift, so now that she can go out on the roof. And like, there's this mirroring symbolism between when she goes out on the roof and touches the rain for the first time and then lets it fall over her. Later, we see Kay touch snow and have the same moment. And it's like, you realize this echoing where it's like, okay, this person knows that they're fake. And they have a fake companion, but the fake companion almost acts more human or acts like it's unaware that it's fake in a way that he doesn't. And but he loves to fool himself. He continues to fool himself to the point where the joy hologram convinces him that he is this baby. Right? That he was the baby. And when this happens, it's incredible where she's sort of phasing through him, leaning on his shoulder and her head's poking through him in the back. I was like, God, I've never seen anything like that before. Yeah. It was so like startling and bizarre.
Same later when Mackenzie Davis becomes Marriott kind of they hires her because she's real to have sex with him, and they sync is what they call it.
It's so it's such a
very
striking and odd visual.
Very
But-
unique. I've
but
never seen it though.
That whole concept of that he allows himself to be manipulated into falling in love with the hologram girl and believe it, you know, and I'm jumping forward here, but later when she gets smashed and he's sort of like wandering the streets after just having the shit kicked out of him and doesn't know what he's going to do. And he runs into the big advertisement version of her that's like 10 feet tall,
Yeah, it's
or
like
not
a
even
monster.
like 100 feet tall.
Yeah, it's huge.
Again,
and she's naked.
Well, so this is again why I said Villeneuve maybe has this like megala horniness to him. But it's such a spellbinding scene in part because she calls him Joe. But she's just saying that to whatever random Joe's walking down the street.
The her reference is pretty spot on.
Yeah,
for
it's
Joy.
very much that. And you see on his face when she calls him Joe that second time, and it's the big giant ad version, he's like, oh, right. Yeah, no, it was never real. No, she wasn't in love with me, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that a replicant can get tricked the same way, I don't know. It was just like layers, so many layers down into the sense of
very. It's a slow burn of a movie.
Very much so.
You know, and I could see why some people may not like it, especially if you haven't seen the first one. Okay, so as he's researching, you know, some of this data, we hear the old Deckard interview with Rachel, and that's when we know, okay, Deckard's going to be in this movie at some point if he's alive.
Yeah.
And so you get that response. You immediately get all the flashbacks of all of the stuff. They can cut to that stuff, which is also great as well.
Because the aesthetic all looks the same, and actually the fact that the movie is
they actually
in
don't do it that much.
Well, and I think the fact that the movie is in such high resolution, and the old movie is obviously an old movie, that seeing the actual footage through the weird little TV monitors makes it so much cooler, because you're like, yeah, that's from the other movie, but like it works perfectly within this aesthetic.
But within this research, they find that there was two kids, twins that had the exact same DNA.
Right.
They were a copy of whatever. And it says the girl is deceased and the boy got away from this orphanage.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they go over to the they go check out the orphanage, and you know, they have this massive wall, and this is like, it's not off-world, right? Is it off-world?
No.
This is basically
it's San Diego.
Yeah, it's basically like a big trash dump.
Well, those crazy trash,
trash
trucks that like drop the garbage out of the bottom. It was amazing looking.
Those are out of Dune too, right?
Oh,
like
100%.
But there's life on each side of the wall, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the side that's more industrial side of everything. And man, that wall is insane.
Yeah. It's huge.
Just the how grand of scale that he does these things, and I know a lot of it's digital, but like it does not seem like that.
Well, and also along with it, where again in the first movie you had that Vangelis soundtrack, there are a couple of kind of vapory, spacey sounding keyboard songs here, but a lot of the movie, the music isn't music. It's like the sound of like an engine revving or like these weird like metal banging noises. And it was so, that big like looming sound. It was so interesting, but it really gave it the sound design in this all over. The sound of the guns.
So good.
The weird pop that the guns made, where you're like, oh yeah, that's not like a regular pistol. It's like this weird popping, like, I don't know, bolt or something.
Yeah. And so once he gets to this orphanage, he finds all these child labor workers building who knows what. There's hundreds of them.
And I can't think of that actor's name, but the guy who's like running the orphanage, I swear every movie he's in, he's dressed exactly like that. I think he's been in like Fear of the Walking Dead, and he's been in like, I don't know, you think he's in Cloud Atlas. It's like in a ton of stuff, and he always seems to have like a weird mesh like hood on. I'm just like, is that from your own personal closet? You just bring it to every set.
He's got a style. Sticking to it. But he starts recognizing parts of this orphanage.
Yeah.
And goes
from those memories.
And goes and finds the toy. It wasn't an implant. It was real.
Yeah.
And he's just taken back, like, holy shit, I'm the
child. Yeah. What are the odds?
And so, in the meantime, in this data research, they go to the dream maker, or the memory maker.
Yeah.
And she's in this weird like bubble of a room. She
Yeah.
has some respiratory thing. Where
I
she has
love
to live
the
inside.
physical thing that looks like a camera
Yeah,
lens.
it's
that
like a
she
camera
uses
lens.
to
Yeah,
make
exactly.
the dreams. It's so
the intro
cool.
to her is in a forest. And
Yeah.
you see her walking, you're like, oh, this is rad. This is kind of way different than everything else.
Yeah.
And then you see Ryan Gosling open a
door, yeah, and you're like, oh, it's a holodeck.
Yeah, it's crazy, but like a cool intro to her, and like, she has certain types of dreams that she's really
Or
good
memories.
at.
We keep calling them dreams.
I do,
but
yeah. I'm
I know.
sorry.
Say I do too.
Sorry, yeah, memories.
memories.
But
yeah, and
she can create them.
And she's like, they're not. Well, first she says, we don't use real memories. Like you have to create them all because a real memory, people will think it's fake because people remember things differently, right? And she starts building a birthday memory right there. Right. She's like, I love birthdays.
But she looks at his memory and said, this really happened.
It's such an amazing scene.
And
again,
and just the foreshadowing of everything is outstanding.
That scene where she's like, just let it play, right? And we sit with the two of them. Again, I wrote this down. I was like, we sit on these two phenomenal actors giving these incredible performances. And I'm like, that's like a 4-minute scene. And I'm like, this is a movie with flying cars. This is a flying car movie. But like they know what they're making, and they know that they can sit with it. Scenes like that, the auditing scene, where he finds out if he's on baseline or not, because you can get, they're so worried the replicants are gonna go crazy and do like what Batty did in the first movie.
Yep.
And apparently that what was it, interlinked, the whole interlinked, like cells interlinked, like fingers interlinked, that whole thing. That actually that was Ryan Gosling's idea.
Huh. They do a similar interview like tactic in the first one.
I mean specifically the lines that he says.
Oh, interesting.
Because that was apparently a technique that he would use to get into character. And so he was telling Villeneuve about it, and he was like, oh, that's what we should use. And apparently there's a version of the movie that has one of those audit scenes, and it's like 6 minutes long. And I was like, oh my God, that would drive you crazy.
You cut that. Please.
Yeah. I mean, but I get it. I'm like, that's also really cool. Because he just keeps like, how can you go through this system? And that felt so like THX 1138, like just this, like the little white box, and it's talking to you and trying to get you to like, repeat things back. Just like in the first movie with the tortoise, and the killing jar and all that stuff.
Going back to the memory maker, she says real memories are messy, right? And I love this idea of real memories are messy, and that the details don't really matter, because when you tell a story or have a memory, you don't necessily talk about all the details, right?
Hey man, it's Herzog, right? It's ecstatic truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was his thing. Like if I could show you, if you could tell me about your very first kiss, and then I said, well, I actually have footage of it right here, you'd be like, that's not it. Right? Because in your head,
100%.
Every time you remember it, you basically are pulling a whole new story together.
So like, what's to say what's real and what's not, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's what you remember is what's real.
It's all subjective.
Exactly. 100%. And, at this point, of the movie, Love, we've met Love and Wallace. At this point, we've gone to their crazy ass building that they have, where like the main base of Wallace's empire.
Yeah.
And we meet Love, his assistant, and then him, who's, I mean, he's only in a couple scenes.
Do you know who it was supposed to be?
Who was there a different actor?
You know who was supposed to play that part? Bowie.
Oh, that would have been so much.
How perfect would that be? And so I don't know why that meant that we got Jared Leto. He's a fucking creep. He's not a terrible actor. Like in some stuff, he's even really good. But except for what was the House of Gucci? Did you ever see that?
I don't think so. Is that the one with Lady Gaga?
Yeah, and Jared Leto's in it under like 10 pounds of rubber latex. playing like a 70-year-old Italian guy, and he sounds like Mario, like Super Mario. It's the worst. We're going to cut to a shot of it right here.
Never confuse shit with cioccolato. They may look the same, but the taste very different. Trust me, I know.
It's the absolute worst, and it's so unintentionally funny. He's in it for a couple of scenes. I hate that he's in this movie because I really, really like this movie, but that's
I do
fine.
too. And happy birthday, like the whole thing with that, and the girl sliding down and cutting open her belly and then talking about procreation.
That like the birth scene of that replicant, that is some existential terror stuff, because it's you're like, it's the fear of being alive as a fully sentient being. You're like, babies don't have to do that, right? But babies, it takes years before they're like, oh, I'm alive, right? If you're like, okay, here's like a 30-year-old woman that like instantly like understands language and knows what they're like, I'm like, that's so scary. I've never thought about it that way. It's really unsettling.
Yeah, no, that's an unsettling scene for sure.
It really is.
But all of this investigation leads to finding Deckard, and they go to Vegas, baby.
So wild.
It
with
is
the
this
whole
orange, dusty Vegas. Like the way it looks is like.
and again,
crazy.
the giant statues of the naked women.
Yeah.
I think I'm onto something with this, Denis. Is this like you want to like Death by Snoo Snoo? You want to get like crushed by a giant woman? Is this one of those things? Anyway, I'm sensing a theme.
But we get him looking for Deckard, wanting some answers, trying to basically saying, Dad.
Yeah, without saying it.
What he wants to say, but like I think he's trying to ease into that whole thing.
And instead he gets his ass handed to
He
him.
immediately gets caught, and they basically beat the shit out of each other.
With glitchy Elvis in the background.
Yeah, they're in this theater
cool
with this
strange.
this projection of an old Elvis thing, but there's lots of things mixed in there.
Yeah.
And it's wild. It's cool, but
It's
it
so
really
cool.
makes the scene, you're just totally uneasy.
Well, and you're
during that scene.
captivated, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like the lights turning off, turns back on, turns off, turns on,
And we don't even see him for an hour and 45 minutes of the movie, Harrison Ford.
And
That's probably all he could sign up for.
Well, we've been doing all these jokes of like him signing back up for all these franchises so he can be killed in all of them, so people
Leave him alone.
stop inviting him to their fucking Comic-Cons, right? But it's like
Never.
But I would say, while that is the joke of all of them, this is the most deserved of the script. Mm-hmm. It makes sense that he's there.
Yes,
and he wasn't phoning it in. He like his acting range here, whereas like, I'm sorry, but like the Star Wars movie, I mean, you're just like, dude, he totally seems like the kind of guy who would sell his likeness to AI and be like, yeah, use me in movies for the next 100 years. I don't care. Right. But, and same with the Indiana Jones ones, like they're so cringy because he so obviously doesn't care. Yeah. But in this, like his acting range is good. Okay. Like,
so they finally get to a reasonable. They're both tired after fighting in this.
Want to have a drink instead?
Let's just go have a drink. And they have a little Q&A session, and we get a huge piece of the story here. Yeah. Which you hope you would get with this scene, but there's this whole like children of men like rebellion thing happening with this baby and this child, understanding it's a miracle. Yeah. So we have to hide it. And his whole reasoning for not knowing his son was part of the plan. Yeah. He had to go away. And he has this great line that says, sometimes when you love someone, you have to be a stranger. What a good line. Yeah. But he was afraid the kid was going to be hunted and poked and prodded and taken apart and all this stuff. So they wanted to protect that child. So just a huge piece of the story, and it's just a small nugget of what actually is going on with this rebellion. I'm sure they could make a whole nother movie about the rebellion.
TV series. Yeah. 100%.
I would watch that.
Oh my God, yes. Well, and all of this gets cut short because, and we've kind of skipped over this a little bit, but Love has been tracking Kay this entire time, and she is what a cool. I don't know that actress. She's so cool though. She is just
Which one?
Love.
Oh yeah.
What else has she been in?
Nothing that seemed familiar.
God, she is the scariest thing on the planet.
She's
I mean,
awesome.
and again, taking from
And she's really doing everything.
and taking from the same kind of like, in the original Blade Runner, the two most vicious replicants are both women, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the stripper woman with the snake, and then obviously there's Daryl Hannah.
Daryl Hannah,
And both of them are like equal parts sexy and terrifying.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true here, where Love just like with that super severe
she's
pulled
got
back
the Rachel
ponytail.
haircut.
Yeah, and just has this like she can be, very prim and proper and very polite and has manners, and then is just
Can be ruthless.
fucking terrifying. And when she's when he goes to the orphanage, she's bombing from above from like some kind of like drone satellite thing.
crazy.
You're just like it's
she
so
has
scary.
full control, and that's what I'm saying.
While she's getting her nails done.
yeah, like she's doing everything. Wallace isn't really privy to all of this.
Wallace just tells her to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so she's really the villain here. And like you said, great to see a female villain. I always love that. She is a badass.
Yeah.
and she, right down to the end, is a fighter.
And again, see, this is another one of these sequences in the car, that final fight with where they're on the side of the wall with the water.
Yeah,
It's like, again, that feels so cyberpunk, even though other than it being like a weird futuristic car, it's more about like the water. And I don't know, there's still something in like the giant expanse, where you can see the waves coming up, and it's like
crazy.
It has this weird vibe though to it that feels
It's like you're in what's that planet in Interstellar where they're like
yeah
walking on the water.
Miller's Planet.
Yeah,
yeah.
It was kind of crazy to think about that. Yeah, it was Miller's Planet. That's right. I love that Gosling's just walking through and sees all of these wooden toys everywhere too.
Yeah.
Like there's just like little details throughout, whether it's a throwback or something really important to the story. You see like, okay, yeah, he is my dad. Like he hasn't said it yet, but you're pretty much confirmed he's my dad. He gets taken by Love and flown back to meet Wallace because Wallace has been wanting to meet him for 30 years. He's the one who, knew Batty and all of this stuff, and so long time thing for him. And then Kay or Joe is just left there, and we find out that Mariette, the hooker, is actually part of this rebellion. She's been kind of undercover this whole time. She introduces us to Freysa, I think is her name, and she's kind of one of the rebellion leaders, and talks about more of this Children of Men like situation of like, this was part of the plan, and one day she's gonna lead the rebellion. And he said, but it was a boy.
Yeah, you're like, no, we changed the information so that no one would ever be able
covered
to
our
find
tracks
her. Yeah.
in a different way. That's what he helped them do, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of that's one of the big moments for him of not just realizing that it wasn't him.
Yes.
And she even says it's so sad. She's like, "Oh, you thought it was you," and he's just like, he's like half embarrassed and half just heartbroken.
Yes,
but also in that moment realizes that he might know who it could be.
And we get a flash of the memory maker in the room.
Yep.
And that's the girl.
Yep.
That's the one who's going to lead the rebellion and everything. And she's already inside.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, and again, it just makes you realize that there's this, the backdrop of this whole story is billions of people all pressed against each other, and yet it's the same thread, right? That the replicant who had the memory that was real is the one who found the bones. So it still is this super tiny story.
Yes, it is.
That only has a couple of people in it.
And now you know why she was crying when she watched that
And
memory.
and why she said,
She's
yes,
like,
it's real.
Oh,
God,
right?
man.
And, like, such a small part of the story. And like I said, the foreshadowing and knowing that and going back and look at genius writing, just great writing all around. They even tried to tempt Deckard with a new Rachel. And he has the best comeback line.
Yeah, her eyes are green.
Yeah.
And then they just and then Love just shoots her in the head right there. It's so fucked up.
You're worthless. And yeah, he has to go through all of that again. And then the rest is pretty much a battle of trying to save Deckard and getting him back to meet his daughter.
Yeah.
But we have that great fight in the ocean.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
And you know, that's an intense scene, especially because he's like slowly drowning.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's so well done because after all the things you've seen, you say to yourself like, well, how can they top any of this? And what they do, again, in a very simplistic kind of a way, like the original, they don't try to top anything. They instead just make this really atmospheric, very violent, very tense sequence. And it's beautiful. Yeah. It's brilliant in its own way, in the way that it's shot, in the way that it's colored and
the water is
lit
unpredictable.
Yeah.
You know, like any ocean, I guess. But it's like you said, the waves are crashing in different angles. And
yeah. All across that flat wall that they're on.
Different.
It's so
and they're
strange.
supposed to be California. You know, like it's Pacific Ocean. So
right.
Anyways, who knows what is actually out there? But wow, what a movie! Like I love this movie so much.
It's incredible.
It's really well done. I don't think I loved it as much the first time. Like it was good and I liked it, and there's parts. But after we kind of had to analyze it and really compare it to the other movie, there's some genius shit happening here.
Totally.
And Denis is just a generational director. He's outstanding.
And I think it really goes, like I said, it kind of reset the caliber of what a cyberpunk world is. And it is more than just, a cyborg hand or like, you know what I mean? Or like a flying car. It's like, it can sometimes just be like the weird room that Wallace is in, like the way that that's lit and the feeling that gives you is like, I don't know, it's something really unique.
I love the world and it didn't bother me, but do you agree that you could probably trim 30 minutes off this movie?
Yeah, probably. Weirdly, I didn't even notice it watching it.
Yeah,
it's
almost
was fine.
a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, it didn't even bug me.
No, it didn't bug me, but like
there's probably spots.
Again, it's just slow. It's a slow paced movie. That's what you're in for. But again, that like invests you in the world more, so it doesn't bother me. Like you said, you don't even notice.
Yeah, it's like she says, man, just let it play.
That's right. All right, thank you very much. Our next cyberpunk film is going to be Akira.
Yep.
So stay tuned for that. Next week we're going to do that one scene from 7.
Yes. Which one is it?
What's in the box?
Thank you.
So please like and subscribe. Join us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all the spaces and places where you find good media. And we'll see you next week.
Bye, you guys.
Thanks.